I never thought of a name for the horse, nor did he give me any. Finally, I settled on the river god. My parents often told me stories about what the river once looked like. Beautiful, lush, from generations before our time. My mother refused to go there after nearly drowning when she was a teenager. It gave her a fear of any body of water. Even taking baths had become difficult for her, while my father would frequently go there as a teenager. A daredevil who would ignore the river's tragic past and would show me pictures of the strange horses of the river, beautiful and deadly. They were said to drag people out into the depths, leaving nothing but a watery grave. A place where many unsolved crimes happen. While morbid, it is of cultural significance, and they wanted me to go there to see it myself. The first time I was on a walk with my parents, during the winter, my mother avoided the river, preferring abandoned buildings to the water's dangerous edge. In an urban jungle, this river remained the last unbuilt place, though many had tried and failed. It never snowed where I live, only a thick haze, cold, gray, and lifeless. Only wild storms that upheaved the terrain, with fallen tree logs and shrubs scattered around. Wildflowers grew with mold and fungi, covering every piece of stone or concrete. No signs of human settlement ever survived here, before nature would find a way to break it. I stepped over the remains of an old park seat, careful to avoid the large wooden splinters. The foundations of homes close by the river were in varying stages of ruin. Signs of old thatch homes and stone circles from the earliest buildings, stone farmhouses and cottages from the 18th century, remnants of fibro, asbestos-ridden places from the 1950s, and finally, a modern square building that had been semi-swallowed by the river. It sat dormant, now the home for wildlife and mold. Mosquitoes circled, laying their eggs in idle patches of water. None of the owners decided to stick it out. A thick fog clung to the air, casting a grey hue over the water and foliage. I saw the outline of my dad, his camera raised taking photos, and walked over to see how he was doing. There had been rumors of wild horses, feral ones who had escaped their containment, and now roamed through the riverbank. No matter how many times they tried to catch them, they always managed to evade capture. They disappear into the mists, leaving nothing but trails of shadow in their wake. A silhouette of a horse head pierced out of the water. It turned to face me, and in the blink of an eye it was absorbed by the mist. I wandered to the water, wanting to be part of it, reaching out with my hands, only for my mother to grab me, scream for my father, and we went back home. I wasn't allowed to return. However, children often didn't obey their parents. I aimed to poke the shoulder beside me, calling my cousin over, only to find he had run off with his friends. Spending time at the old river was part of my early teenage years, with no other forms of entertainment in the local township. My teeth chattered, keeping my arms close to my chest and rubbing my hands together to keep the warmth in. Sitting on a fallen log that served as a bench, watching and waiting, I remembered hearing stories of ghosts, horses and people who would whisper, calling for any to enter the water. At dusk, I remembered watching in awe at the sight of that elongated head, peeking out of the water before it rose to its feet. Yet it never left the water. Always standing on the edge, the tide was out, and visibility had improved considerably. The fog withdrew. I saw it clearly for the first time. The yellow, bloodshot eye keeping sight of me, unblinking. And I felt I was in the presence of a being not of this world. The intensity struck me. An eyelid moved over it, closer to a lizard than a horse. I knew not to get too close to the shoreline. I stopped a meter away, my feet sinking a little into the sand, and the sound of water trickling. Its long, thick mane had seaweed, and small pieces of bone intertwined in it. I was unsure whether the bone fragments were human or animal. The fur resembled dried stone, was coarse in some areas, and bald in others, with large cracks and ribs that protruded from its flanks. It didn't chew or move its head like any living horse I had previously encountered, instead staying perfectly still. It had all the shape of a horse, yet the proportions felt unnatural. One part too large one moment, then another. I blinked, wondering whether anyone else saw him. My cousin further down the pathway looked past him, through him, laughing while they scooped up their random finds with their hands, and disappeared into the mist. I could hear them laughing, oblivious to the fact we weren't alone. I debated calling out to them and running to catch up with them. For a time, it felt like we were by ourselves, staring up at the being, both a source of light and darkness. A fascination now awoken. "Who are you?" I whispered. My question hung in the air, where my nose wrinkled at the foul aroma of the water, polluted, and still with a chance to fester. My hand rose, covering my mouth, and stepped back. It didn't address me. Slowly it turned its head, muzzled toward the deeper depths. And suddenly, I started imagining how comforting, how warm the water would be. I imagined walking inside, the water slowly moving up my body until it reached my neck, and the floating feeling of safety lured me. It was warm rather than cold, and the feeling of security filled me, relaxing me. Why did I want to be here forever? I closed my eyes and remembered the river was polluted and dirty. It was dangerous. I jerked, opened my eyes, and saw the water now reach my knees. Looking around, feeling the reeds and other plant life around me, holding me snugly in place. And I knew I wasn't alone. The horse's muzzle parted, revealing a dribble of congealed blood. Lips drawn back and the teeth were sharp. Backstepping suddenly, the sludge gripped and pulled on my boots, eventually causing me to fall back and using my arms, feeling the grime between my fingers, and staring up at the unblinking horse, standing over me with a neutral expression. My cousin teased me about falling, and the muddy stain on the back of my pants. They offered me a hand and pulled me out of the mud. I murmured something about a horse in the river, and when I looked over to where it had been, I saw it was gone, sitting on a folded picnic rug and a piece of tarp to protect the back seat of my uncle's old, shabby car. The bumpy road through the mountains, made of wild, twisting lines of asphalt, caused me to gaze out the window, expecting a horse's face to stare back at me. There was routinely nothing in the reflection, other than my blank face staring back. Azure mountains and blue-green forest passed by the window, blinking slowly. I knew it would be some time until we were back in civilization. The afternoon drifted to dusk, and with heavy eyelids, I drifted off to sleep. I kept seeing shadows from the corners, glowing red eyes, and whispers of a tongue long forgotten. It was getting closer, kin to the river god, perhaps. I woke up to my uncle shaking me by the shoulder, telling me to wake up, sleepyhead, and he would see me next week. Sleepily, I barely remember saying my goodbyes and stumbling into the house. After being dropped off at home, I went straight up to shower and told my parents I'd grab something to eat in the morning. I flopped face first on the bed, arms dangling over the edge, and my dreams went back to that same river. I walked on the shoreline. It was a clear day, not a cloud in the sky. A moon and sun both danced above me. It was peaceful. A shadow lurked through the water. Ripples extended outward until they reached the shoreline. Staring out, I waited for the spectre to approach, only for it to drift downstream. Around me, people were walking with their families, playing games and having barbecue. I remember a voice, soft and serene, telling me that one time the river was a perfect blend of human involvement and the natural world, combining both in perfect symmetry. A solitary scream came, loud and shrill. A body was found, and soon a horde of humans surrounding it, pointing it and growing fearful. I wondered why no one bothered to call the police. I couldn't see who it was. Peeking through them, I saw the remains of a teenage girl, laying in the reeds and her hand reaching out, just on the edge of the shoreline, limp and lifeless, with clammy skin in her Sunday dress, ripped and pulled up to her waist, and her black hair clung to her face. A man pulled it back to reveal faint blood from her open lips. I noticed all of her teeth were missing, and leaving empty gums in the process. A woman pulled down her skirt to protect her modesty. Her boyfriend was on his knees, sobbing when he saw her body being brought out, covered in a tarp, weeping how he swore he saw something grab her from under the water, while people were distracted with her corpse. A circle formed around it to keep onlookers from tampering with the body. Whispers of the river's legends were told. It had been over 50 years since the last corpse had been found. Parents took their children away from the scene, leading them by the hand while they pulled, wanting to see it for themselves. Several police cars, and one for the only funeral home in town, came to retrieve the body. They set up a perimeter. The boy disappeared, only to be found later that night, face down in the reeds, a strange bloody mark at his neck, and whispers of her family taking revenge circled the town. Onlookers left the crime scene after the police told them to leave, while smoking a cigarette. A weathered detective stood on the shoreline, staring out into the river. His focus wasn't on the body, but on the horizon. A local who had heard all the legends and saw him walking through the mist before he disappeared. The detective watched with a long, intense draw of the cigarette, and later he'd be hitting the bottle hard. The other officers tended to the corpse retrieval, a silent knowing of the cause of what occurred. Both cases to this day remain unsolved, with none wishing to speak about it. one of many that remained in old, dusty boxes, with no answers accepted by science, other than knowing whispers among locals. It was silenced. I saw their ghosts lingering on the shore, their hands pleading with me in silent yearning for me to join them. Some were rotten, some closer to skeletons, while others were fresh, plump. Some had pale, bloated bodies where their skin had absorbed great amounts of water. For this generation, the river was forever changed, the folklore made flesh. They were one of many people who had been found in the river, always a man and a woman. It didn't matter the age. There was nothing sharp nor sudden that pulled me from my dream. Stretching and arching my back, with my arms out the sides. My house was dark still. The morning dawn no longer brought light through the windows. My hometown close enough to be impacted by the spread of the fog. Getting out of bed, opening my bedroom door, and felt water at my feet. I swore, called down the hallway for my parents, telling them that a pipe must have burst. Walking on my tippy toes through the water, leaving smaller splashes as I moved, and without an obvious source, I went to the most likely of places. "Hey, the house is flooding!" I called out loudly, hoping to wake them, but didn't want the damage to get worse than it already did. I noticed it came from the bathroom, and once I opened the door, it slamming behind me, and noticed the faucets of the sink were running, water spilling over the edge. I turned both faucets of the sink, turning them off, and then realized something clogged it. The shower was also running full pressure, with steam rising from the tiles and creating a foggy atmosphere inside. Damn it! The condensation was hot, and turning both sets of faucets off, and burning my hands in the process. It too was blocked at the drain. Reaching in, pulling out thick, sloppy mud and tree roots. "What the hell?" I questioned, holding it up and examining it between my fingers, wrinkling my nose in pure disgust, wiping it on a pristine hand towel, leaving a dark stain marking the white. I could still hear water coming from other rooms, swearing and calling out again to my parents to help me, running down the hallway to the kitchen sink, my feet splashing on the tiles, and I turned the faucets off. The water had spilled over the top. It was murky, brown, and smelled like the river, and reaching down to find the drain was blocked by the same substance as the bathroom. The kitchen window had a dab mist, and it wasn't normal. Looking in the pooling water, a flash of a figure and a muzzle rose, grabbing my wrists and pulling me. I pulled back, feeling the teeth sink into my flesh, and reaching for a dirty knife waiting to be cleaned, stabbing it repeatedly in a blind panic. Unsure how, I was pulled down up to my shoulder, yanking back and forth, feeling like my arm was on the verge of being pulled from its socket, screaming for help that never came inside the empty house. I managed to yank my arm out, falling backward, and breathed heavily, feeling my wrist for any sign of damage. Other than being filthy, it was intact. Breathing heavily, resting a hand on the kitchen counter and heaving, my heart racing. Leaning over, I stared down inside to see that cold, golden eye of the river god locked on me and I knew I was its prey. A low rumble. It tried speaking to me, and I closed my eyes, trying to block it out. I had to be dreaming. There was no way it could reach out to me like this. The eye blinked, only to see my parents staring up at me, silently screaming, gurgling on water, drowning before they slid down the pipe. "What the hell?" I whispered, opening the cupboards beneath and seeing nothing but a choking mess of roots, vines, and plant matter. I couldn't reach it even if I tried. Looking out the window, seeing my neighbors' houses as mere shadows surrounded by that mist. It was raining, soft, gentle, and constant. I heard slow-moving hoofbeats approaching me. Turning around, I saw nothing, and instinctively moved to put my back to the sink, picking up the kitchen knife again, holding it above, ready to strike if I was attacked. The sound stopped. Now only the idle trickle of water. This time it came from the walls, casting an almost serene look to the establishment. Gently water flowed down the tiles, creating small streams with smaller, identical worlds springing to life, with their own life forms and vegetation. Compared to the stark place it had been, spellbound and staring at it, I knew it was a waking dream, one escape from seemingly impossible. Perhaps if I ran to my bedroom, I'd see myself still sleeping. Quickly I ran, and the plaster cracked down the walls, opening my bedroom door, and seeing my sleeping form with a black mare, a nightmare standing over it. I screamed, trying to wake up, and all my sleeping form did was lay dormant, eyes frozen open. With an unnatural coldness in the air, the mare's red eye, seemingly removed from her head, turned to face me. Fleeing back to the kitchen, beneath my feet the tiles cracked, roots and plant life pierced through, twisting and turning away the human world, since theirs had been invaded. Why not do the same to us? The rummaging grew louder, more oppressive, and suddenly, in a well I was pulled through the drain pipe. This had to be the real nightmare. Choking, moving through water, and finally flailing my arms until I met with dirt. Water filled my lungs and gasping for air, coughing as I went, hauling my torso out of the water and coughing up the grime from the river. After I was done heaving, depleted and helpless, laying on my stomach with my head to one side, feeling something standing over me, rolling on my back to see that dread horse gazing down at me, who's concealed by the water, with seaweed and twisting vines running up its legs, blurring the line between its body and the river itself. Its body was stone, cracked and roots piercing up through the gaps, while barnacles lived on its flanks. A long tail descended into the water. No, it was part of the watery mass. It regarded me with that eye of his, yellow, closer to a feline than a horse. Was he some forgotten god who still lingered on the fringes while others were held in reverence? A low rumble emitted from its mouth, beyond mine or any human's understanding. Timeless, a god made flesh. I looked at my hand. It had large bite marks and a finger that had been yanked off close to the knuckle. My pajama arm was torn, ripped at the sides. I curled my fingers, looking up at the sky, cast between dawn, dusk, and the timeless endless of night. I crawled out of the water and made my way up the shore, only to realize my quest for safety was a false one, holding up my arm to stop it from attacking me. Just in case. Please. What do you want with me? I pleaded, looking up at the overgrown shrubs and wild banks. Silence followed an echo of a woman's voice, spoken in a language I couldn't understand. Reaching out, my hand felt something hard, and I lifted up a skeletal arm, picked clean of flesh, the rotted clothing still clinging to the bones. Holding it in aghast horror before throwing it and scrambling, digging into the earth to pull my body up in fearful determination, hearing a crunch when my finger loosened, and figured losing part of my finger was better than dying. Bones of countless dead moved through my fingers, most rotted down to the barest fragments, and loose shards breaking down to join the rest of the sand. Their whispers circled, luring me in for a chance to temporarily ease their suffering. A rare moment of reprieve, slow and steady. My struggles were no use, and I found my bare feet, first feeling the cool caress of the water, kicking out, screaming, and that rumble came again. Feeling the intensity, I knew he was the source. This time I saw several times from the past, buildings erected in haste, a time of fertility and bliss with nothing but security. Countless generations walked through, and their distinctive clothing, customs, even languages that differed over time. Families moving close to the bounty the river provided. Food, water, scenery, and a place to call home. The dream traveled back further in time, when their ancestors' ancestors first came to the river. Low chanting filled the skies, an eternal gratitude to the spirits who roam the land. Wine and beer poured into the water, boiling metal dropped inside, the most precious of their gifts and thanks, with the most important yet to come. The pair, a royal youth, the king's beloved heir, and a virgin girl, blessed with foresight, came forward. Both were divinely touched with health and good looks, with comely faces, naked and painted in the hue of blue plants, with long forgotten symbols, holding each other's hands. They walked into the river up to their waists, eyes closed in bliss, knowing their sacrifice would forever connect their people to the land. First the woman for creation. A priest took her, plunging her head under the water, and soon instinct took over. She scratched and kicked out at him, who held her until she passed. Her body flowed freely in the water. The prince received differing treatment. A dagger plunged into his neck. His blood squirted out and mixed with the water. The priest's words chanting, an offer to the river god who took form. Their bodies pushed into the middle of the river, an offering given. A grey stallion, the river god came from the depths. Only this time, he appeared healthy and filled with vigor. His mane was a watery trail flowing down his neck, while his tail equally born of water, the coat unblemished with living vines flowing up his legs. He was in his prime here, worshipped, feared, adored, a guardian and protector of the river. The dead sank beneath the surface. The soul signed the offering had been accepted. Their bodies claimed. The priest, recognizing the personification, bowed his head in reverence, and pierced his own skin, twisting and pulling into circular patterns to demonstrate an acceptance of a promise given. I saw countless number of their kind approach. Generation after generation would come and make their offerings in good and blood. Their tribute, the sacrifice would become his speakers, their parts becoming one with the river god, and a mere whisper of themselves. For a time, things worked. Her words, soft and delicate, her accent foreign to my ears, and I realized I was speaking to the god. I looked behind me for the source to find. Nothing. Whoever he was seemed appeased by their offerings, and the land was lush, fertile. The memory faded, and soon I was back on that foul-smelling riverbank, the maw of the great beast centimeters from my head. I don't want to be a sacrifice, remembering the countless willing who had gone to him. Another memory. A people of conquerors dressed in wolfskin and leather armor came to drive the priests away. They cut down any who opposed them, leaving entire streams of blood pouring into the river. All the wooden idols and traditions, replacing the river spirit with their own gods, before another force drove those gods away with a singular, all-powerful one. Their tattooed bodies no longer, their language barely spoken, and soon barely an echo remained. The river god, now starved, would lure young maidens and youths to the shoreline, dragging them down beneath the water to claim their souls into his keeping, seeking answers that never came. The locals became wary of the power of the water, saying the river was cursed. An old crone, a survivor, whispered that he was angry and that we'd never find peace here. Any wild horses running spread rumors of the river god, a case of mistaken identity. People would abandon horses here, especially pregnant mares for him to claim. Foals were never seen. Soon none desired to be offered to him, and their offerings non-existent. They'd still take from the river, feasting on its bounty and casting their waste inside. Old furniture, food wrappings, construction materials, and used items of an intimate nature, no longer needed. I could feel its anger at the neglect, the disrespect, and the lack of reverence. A price had to be paid. Gone were the fire of youth, and now a change had corrupted him, turning him into the dread beast he was now. It had morphed into something twisted, polluting the water, allowing it to die, and thus a punishment needed to occur. The sacrifices of the unwilling had increased, although they never came into the water unwilling or unaware, screaming and pleading for their lives as I had done. All the homes nearby had become his, haunting their dreams, sending his unholy daughters nightmares, black mares of dread who spawned night terrors, twisting and turning souls until they were inside out, madness kissing their minds, driven to drowning themselves in pools outside or in their bathtubs, condemning themselves to their watery fates. Those who survive would flee the scene, leaving behind their tainted possessions to be claimed by the flooding river. Yet those sacrifices weren't enough for the insults. Any guest who had come would be haunted. Confused, my hand cautiously reached up to his muzzle, recanted and withdrew it. The haunted calls of the dead surrounded me, the shadows of figures with their remains gone from the earth. The sand, silently commanded by him, held my arms in place, molding perfectly to my limbs and becoming solid. The water crept up around me, my nose, mouth, and chin above the surface. I could barely breathe, my sight obscured by the murky water, causing the shapes to blur and twist into horrid patterns, merging reality with the unseen world. My body lingered between the living and dead. I wanted to live. I saw the first two, solely garbed in their tattoos, gazing through the water at me, crowned with a circle of seaweed and with white demonic eyes, still holding hands, and unlike the others they were unblemished. The others of their people stood as shadows, silent voices who whispered compared to those unwilling, who wailed in terrifying laments of their passing. Perhaps if one had been willing? Truth was, even with the choice in front of me, knowing my fate if I didn't comply, I want to die. For you. The sand gripped me tighter, and the muzzle descended. Lips pulled back to reveal surprisingly horse-like insect teeth, plunging into my chest and biting through the skin. I wanted to scream, yet nothing escaped my lips. He wants me to suffer as much as possible, I thought to myself. The low rumble responded to me. A greater pain suffered, the better the reward. I saw another memory, perhaps a vision of the future, one where the river was restored, back in balance with people, and those free to leave if they wish. No threat of dying by the water's edge, no sending out the nightmares to trespassers, and homes no longer being flooded. Balance, no pollution nor garbage discarded by the waterways. Paradise. He stopped, a green crab wriggling down his forelock, before regarding me with that steady yellow eye. I realized the river god too had been in pain. A long, silent agony that never ceased. An Ouroboros of continuous suffering. The more it would hurt, the greater the healing. I opened my mind. Thoughts, feelings, and my connections to my old life no longer mattered. My eyes closing in eternal surrender. Once, twice, until its mouth entered me with foul teeth around my heart, lifting its head and tearing veins whilst blood spurt. He popped it, sending crimson over the sand, the only color left in a dreary world of grey. One bite followed another, ripping, pulling, and his daughters pulling the horrific memories from my mind, granting me a moment of reprieve. Gazing up at the sky, feeling my skin pulled away, pain no longer mattered to me, and I thought I saw the clouds part, with a hint of sun peering through, passing. I knew I was dying. My heart still beat in his muzzle, locked between his teeth, still bursting traces of blood, without knowing it was no longer needed. And patiently, I waited. The river god's teeth clamped down, causing it to burst, and my body fell limp. I heard the scurrying of 1,000 small crabs, entering my eye sockets and pinching, pulling their way through. My sacrifice resulted the return of a pact. My human body no more, doing his bidding. I was broken and twisted beyond repair, extending out to match his body. Human skin draped over an equine form, my features elongated and turned into a horse head. My hair created a patchy mane that grew long over time. When I approached humans, they ran and whispered, too frightened to continue their illegal dumping of goods. The river god, now with a truce of flesh, he transmuted full time into stone, taking the form of a statue, and only appearing when it was time to accept a sacrifice. Blood would fill the cracks and he would be reborn, free to hunt in the mist before the skies would clear and humans would return unharmed. And that is why you and your partner are here. I hope you enjoy this story. What did you think of it? Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Don't forget to stab the like button, subscribe, hit the bell and leave a comment. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreon subscribers, and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. Don't forget to check out my social media accounts below, including my merch. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.